Welcome back to another episode of Did Last Night Really Happen? Roll the intro. I reckon we're going to win by over 30 points. Quaino on his debut is going to have over 400 metres gained, over 20 possessions, and 4 intercept possessions. Well, to no one's surprise, my gut feeling for last night's game was way off. And my big calls for Quaino were absolutely insane, but how good was he last night? One of the only highlights of the game. For the first 3 quarters of this game, it was absolutely unbearable to watch. Not because we were getting pumped or we were doing the pumping, it was just because it was an ugly game of football. Very scrappy, skills were nowhere to be seen, inaccurate in front of goals, and there was just no run and no one was taking on the game. But somehow we found ourselves on top for, I think it was like 90 minutes of the game up until halfway through the last quarter. Our first quarter was half decent and we were pretty effective going inside the forward 50 for 4 goals straight to Hawthorn's 1 goal 5. Our first couple of goals came from a lot of forward pressure and a lot of turnovers, which is a positive and not how we played the week prior against the Kangaroos. And although we didn't give up the lead till halfway through the last quarter, everything after quarter time was pretty much played into Hawthorn's hands and in Hawthorn's forward 50. And because of that, they kept us to 2 single goal quarters, the second and the third. And honestly, if it wasn't for the Hawks' shonky goal kicking, we would have lost by a lot more than we actually did. But much to our credit, somehow, we were 18 points up during the last quarter, and then the Hawks, out of nowhere, kicked 4 consecutive goals. But prior to that, in the first 3 quarters, they had only kicked 4 goals for the entire game. In a game that was meant to be the polar opposite to the Kangaroos game, it was anything but. And if Buckley was bloody embarrassed with what we dished up against the Kangaroos, he must be livid about letting a 3-goal lead slip in the dying minutes. Isaac Quaino looks a player and a half though, doesn't he? He was one of the highlights of the game. He oozed confidence, and by a couple of nervy disposals, he really tried to take on the game, showed that he can run a little bit, very smart with the ball, and he looks solid in our backline. Shazza's second game back saw him gain a little bit more confidence, a little bit more backing of his own ability, which saw him take 4 contested possessions and 4 intercept possessions, including some where he spoiled the ball going back with the fly or throwing his body into a contest. In the last quarter, Pendle showed why he's one of the best. He gathered a lot of the ball, tried to set up as much as he could, and provided that run through the centre, took the game on when no one else would. Our defence has been great all season, but really stood up yesterday when it counted after all the bombardment that the Hawks were doing inside their forward 50, the repeat entries, and the high balls coming in. I know it's been like a revolving door in our back line. We haven't had a back 6 stay together for much of the season, no consistency, but they really stood up, and if it wasn't for them, we would have lost by a lot more than we did. So we've got to give credit to them for allowing us to be in the game when we absolutely had no right to be. I dislike the lack of will from the players. As I said before, this game was supposed to be a response to the Kangaroos game. We were supposed to come out harder, stronger, quicker, and every word under the sun, but we just looked lost for it bar the start of that first quarter. Still, there was lots of broken tackles. Still, there was a half-assed attempts at tackles or chasing down, and there was just no run, no give, no one taking on, and no one wanting the responsibility of doing anything. Sire's place in the team looks a bit shaky, especially with Adams ready to come in from injury. For the whole game yesterday, he had 9 disposals and 1 goal. 50% of those disposals were ineffective, so he pretty much had 4 or 5 good hits. He's had a bad couple of weeks, which really sucks because Dave Beam's going out, Sire needed to lift. He had a couple of good games and then some really bad ones, including last night. Because when he's on, he's really on. 2018, he was a star, towards that second half of the season. He just has to find that form again. Mason Cox just isn't the same player that he was at the start of the season and in 2018, ever since that ankle injury against Essendon. Towards the back half of last year and the start of this year, every ball that was getting kicked to him, he was marking. Those sticky hands was what he was known for, but now those hands have turned to jelly. He couldn't get into the game last night and was pretty much beaten in every one-on-one contest. I've been repeating this all game, but the lack of will, desire and heart was prevalent all throughout last night's game. Those 3 factors aren't something you're able to coach or quantify or show because they come from within. Has Steve-O's suspension and Dave Beam's battle with mental health shaken the team to its core? Has injuries taken a toll on everyone? Is everyone just run down? There's a lot of questions to be asked. I just want to show this one passage of play that kind of sums up how our night went. As you can see, Grundy's attempted to take the mark, didn't take it. landed awkwardly on the floor, but he doesn't get up to provide that second effort, and the Hawks go on to kick an important goal in the last quarter and gives them that momentum. Grundy's known for his second efforts and his chase, and this just sums up where we're at as a club at the moment. It's easy to place the blame on injuries, but when you look at who we've got injured, you can see why us as supporters do place the blame on injuries, really. It's amazing how much we missed Langdon's silk in the back line, Howe's intercept marking, and Adams's grunt. Not only injury is bad, but it also affects our depth and our VFL side as well, with no one able to come up. Elliott, after 2 months of being injured, is thrust into a must-win game half-baked, you know what I mean? He hasn't got any match fitness, and because of that lack of depth and all those injuries, you can't play him in the VFL, even though that's the best case scenario, giving him 1 or 2 games. You have to bring him in because our forward line isn't working. And it's just a snowball of effects that turn into a big boulder and we get avalanched. I've harped on about it for the last couple of videos, but the inside 50 count and the repeat inside 50s by the opposition is really killing us, and you can't go on and win a game when your backline is getting pummeled. Now get this for a stat. The last time we won an inside 50 count was round 10 against Sydney, and we had just won that. Since then, we've lost 3 of the 5 games that we've played. At quarter time, Hawthorn had 18 inside 50s to our 5. At the moment, our forward 50s is a shambles. Cox can't find the ball. Elliott has just come back from injury. Will Hoskin, Elliott, and Josh Thomas are pretty much nowhere to be seen, besides the hyphens, couple of goals that he kicked, but you can tell that he's lacking in confidence as well. And Mychik is playing up the ground because we need that one tall player on the wings to outmark and penetrate the 50. Our best forward this season, Dugoe, kicked 2 goals, but he was thrown into the midfield because our midfield wasn't firing, and he provided that grunt in that last quarter, got a few clearances, but you can't have 2 Dugoes, so he couldn't kick to himself, and none of our other forwards are firing, so you can see what the problem is with Adams being out and our midfield not performing like they should. Yes, Steve-O's suspension really hurts us. He does change the dynamic of the team, but on paper we do have a good forward line, and this is the forward line that got us to the grand final last year. Bar Steve-O. But something isn't clicking, and that has to change really quickly. Also, this last point that I want to bring up, there's less than a minute to go, and we have to win the ball on a turnover and bring it into our forward 50. But instead of playing man on man and forcing that turnover, everyone's flooded the back line and the Hawks are just able to chip it around. I cannot begin to tell you how frustrated I was last night watching that. They were just chipping it around in the centre while everyone was in the back line trying to prevent a goal that was never going to happen anyway. Big deal if they kicked a goal. We were still going to lose if we didn't man up and didn't take the game on. So it's just, you can tell how frustrated I am now. Just, ugh. 1 vote, Darcy Moore. Kept another All-Australian forward goalless, 10 intercept possessions, and was a rock down back. 2 votes, Treloar. Gathered 31 disposals and had 9 clearances, which was a game high. 3 votes goes to Jack Crisp, one of our better defenders, and was the only one that was trying to provide that run-off half-back. Had 7 intercept possessions and kept us in the game. Huge game next week against West Coast. As you all know, we've lost our last 4 against them. They're our most recent bogey side, and we're playing up in Perth. West Coast are also battling for a top 4 spot, so this is going to be a must-win game, but every game's a must-win game, how we're playing at the moment. The lack of options of who I'd like to bring in doesn't sit well with me, because I'd love to drop a handful of players to give them more game time in the VFL to get their confidence up. If Adams is ready, he comes straight back into the side. Hopefully he is. I know he said he's going to be ready for the Giants, but hopefully he's ready by Friday night. So my predicted ins and outs are going to be Adams, Varco, and Noble, giving us a bit of that run in the forward line. And going out would be Thomas, Sire, and Will Hoskin, Elliott. Bit of a different one there, but they need to get that confidence up in the VFL. Yes, we're a shadow of 2018, of who we were and where we should be, but not to despair. We're going to finish in the top 4 after this round, and I think we'll finish in the top 4 at the end of the season. We will turn it around. So that's just my little rant, my little review of last night's game. Like, comment, subscribe, tell your family, tell your friends, tell your pets. Follow me on Instagram at Swoop Luke, and until next time, I'll swoop you later. Shaking the cord of this team.